market's always set up for rotation at some point, right? So the market itself is doing okay, but it's being driven by primarily three sectors. It's being driven by industrials, transportation, and technology. And those sectors have really been outperforming relative to the S&P here over the last few weeks in particular. Let's just go ahead and talk about what you need to know before the bell this morning. So first of all, the market rallied just a little bit yesterday. Again, we kind of just flirting here with all-time highs and trying to just navigate this market here temporarily, which is fine. Again, markets are overbought on several levels, but again, nothing overall is kind of really concerning relative to the markets right now. But there are some things to kind of pay attention to, which is the market's always set up for rotation at some point, right? So the market itself is doing okay, but it's being driven by primarily three sectors. It's being driven by industrials, transportation, and technology. And those sectors have really been outperforming relative to the S&P here over the last few weeks in particular, but they are extremely overbought. Those sectors are extremely overbought now. In fact, if we just take a look at technology just as a good example, because it's been kind of leading the charge here as of late, just a fantastic move here recently in the technology index, despite all the concerns about tariffs and AI is dead and all this. Technology has really been kind of leading the way. And again, like I said, if you take a look at industrials, they've also been posting well, and particularly and this is kind of this whole idea of this AI infrastructure build out requirement. People kind of piling into that. Companies that are in that index in particular have been doing well. But again, these sectors are getting very, very overbought. So as is always the case, what happens at some point is you get a rotation from these leading sectors. You get a risk-off trade in the markets, and then that pulls money back into areas like staples, which have been underperforming really as of late. And again, despite the fact that you have the markets breaking out to new highs, staples have not, and they continue to kind of support. But this, those kind of company areas, staples, take a look at financials, which again, about to start reporting, they're doing okay, but they're kind of dragging relative to the market. So if we get into a risk-off trade in the markets, the point is that money doesn't necessarily leave the market, it just changes where it goes to. So if we get a risk-off trade for whatever reason, and look, there's a rising probability that we'll get some type of risk-off trade, 3 to 5% over the next couple of months. If that happens, we'll see that rotation into areas that have been really underperforming. REITs is a good example, but they're interest rate sensitive. So interest rates have been kind of moving up here lately. Not surprising, they had a big rally, so giving up some of that rally. But REITs have been kind of lagging here in the markets, but that could be a rotational trade to look at if we start to see, we see weak CPI again, and a weak PPI number that increases the odds of rate cuts. That's going to bring interest rates down. And declining interest rates will bode well for real estate plays. So again, that kind of sets that market up for that rotation. Again, doesn't mean you make that trade today, but it's something you want to kind of keep a watch on, because we're getting a pretty big deviation between these kind of risk-on trades and the defensive risk-off trades. Same thing goes between high beta stocks, like if you own an ETF, like the S&P High Beta Index. Vanguard Value Index has been extremely out of favor. So you'll see a rotation potentially between high beta and value in kind of the ETFs as well. So again, these are just kind of things to think about. I posted a couple of charts about this on my Twitter page this morning. So if you go to X, follow @LanceRoberts, I posted a couple of charts about this potential rotation trade on my account this morning. So again, but that's what you need to know before the bell this morning.